It's now 4:30, and it's September 27th. I'm going to call this meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. Could I have a motion, please, concerning our agenda?
Move approval.
Mr. Bakke, thank you. Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. Could I have a similar motion, Mr. Bakke, concerning the consent agenda?
Absolutely, I move approval of the consent agenda as distributed.
Again, my gracious thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the same sign. Let's move down to number 6, which is customers to be heard. Do I see any that want to be heard? Not particularly. Any recognitions, Bill?
Other than our distinguished Commissioner Bakke, who
Our
will be,
secretary slash parliamentarian?
which is his last meeting, so. I
You
don't
know, we
if you wanna-
thought this day would never come, you know, but as did Les, now that I think about it.
That's one way.
Yeah, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Les for serving as my parliamentarian low these many years and doing a wonderful job of trying to keep me in line. And for those of you who are watching on television, you don't know much about this guy, but I can tell you he volunteers in so many different aspects of the things that happen in Moorhead, whether it's taking care of the veterans, preparing history regarding veterans, taking care of the Rourke Gallery from time to time on a volunteer basis, I'm told, and all sorts of other things. And we're going to miss you, Les. We really are.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything nice they want to say about Les? You do?
I do.
Okay.
I do. And it'll be very brief, but I was just saying to him before the meeting got started, I am going to really miss having Les sitting here next to me in these meetings. It surprises me. I've been around for 5 years already. But I remember my first meeting and sitting down in this seat, and Les immediately just welcomed me and just made me feel really, really comfortable in the job. And we've had great chats here about the work, and he's been a good leader and a good mentor, and I've appreciated the time with him. So I too will miss you, sir.
Thank you. I'm not leaving town.
I know, but you're not going to be here. And this
Well,
is-
yeah, we're going to try to keep you out of here, though, Les.
Please don't.
Any other comments? John?
Well, I've had the pleasure to work with Les since Moorhead State College days.
John and I have known each other longer than the rest of you three combined.
You guys are old.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a good thing.
As an old dragon to another old dragon, I appreciate your commitment and all the work that you've done and your expertise. And definitely, I've learned to, when Les speaks, you should listen.
Here, here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the sign of a true gentleman is that you can stand up here and disagree, and Les and I have disagreed over a number of things over the years, and walk away and remain, I hope, friends, because I really do like this guy, and I am very sincere in my comments. We are going to miss you.
I suggest we move on to the next item.
I thought, not so fast, big boy.
Well, I was just going to, from the staff of Moorhead Public Service, I wanted to make sure and thank Les for all of his service. Les has been involved in Moorhead Public Service even longer than he's been on the commission, because he was instrumental in sitting on a committee to help us choose our current and only IT director, and that was shortly before you became a commissioner. And then since then, I mean, he's been involved in many committees and done a lot of work for the staff, so thank you, Les.
And he's also been volunteered to hang around for a while, but we're not going to talk about that yet. Okay, then we will move on, Les.
Okay.
Bill, any old business?
No.
Members of the City Council, welcome, Chuck.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
You know, they've been having troubles with mics the last 24 hours. I understand Mr. Trump had a similar situation.
Yeah, I saw that. Just not much to report. City Council, we're in the middle of a election cycle right now, so people are busy with that. I want to thank Bill, Dave, and Chris for presenting last night. It was a good presentation. Appreciate the information. And just working through the budget right now and just doing some end-of-the-year things right now for the City Council. But everything seems to be on track, so.
Good. It's good that we're having a nice, smooth fall with the City Council. In the past, that wasn't necessarily the case. Thanks, Chuck.
Yep.
Members of the Public Services Commission, anything to report? John?
Yes. Bill, if you could give an update at the EDA meeting on Monday, there was discussion about the easement is still in negotiations between the city and Moorhead Public Service, and they didn't really say any specific progress being made or not. So if you could just update that on us.
There's progress being made on that. We did actually talk about this at a previous commission meeting, I believe in closed session, so I'll be careful what I say, although it's not too much under wraps. I mean, what we're doing is working with our attorney to make sure that we can relinquish a portion of our easement in the industrial park so that the city can sell some of that land to a developer. And I think we've agreed in principle on that relinquishment, which, I mean, that's not the hard part. What we're trying to do is get enough of an easement on the other side of the line to kind of equalize what we're giving up. So we're in the middle of working on that. Travis is working on that. He's not here this evening, but I can maybe provide or have him provide a further update in the future, but we're trying to get that wrapped up.
Do you have any idea when that'd be completed, by chance? Because I think there's a contract
Urgency?
that's being kind of put on hold until that gets resolved, so.
I'll check. I don't know, Matt, do you have any idea on that one? No. Okay, I'll check with Travis, because he's out of town for his brother's wedding, but he is available, so I'll give him a call on that. I just don't remember what his timeline was.
Anybody else have anything to report? I'll give a very short report. Bill and I had occasion to have lunch with our new appointee who will be taking Les's position, Chris Thompson. We had a very nice conversation with her. We look forward to her coming on board. Hopefully she'll be here by our next meeting. Bill, anything to report?
Other than what's in the report, there's just a couple items there. I don't have anything else to report.
Okay. Casey, you're looking at me like... well, yeah, but it's about you, Casey. So okay. I'm going to move down to number 9 since Casey's question has apparently been answered. That is to approve the dual fuel system conversion incentives for North Moorhead, specifically for our Red River Valley cooperative customers. Bill, would you please talk about this?
As you all know, we are in the final stages of providing electric service to about 2/3 of Oakport, which is the Red River Valley cooperative customers. Next year we'll do the 1/3 that is XL customers. And again, as we've been discussing this, we've had a number of discussions regarding how we're going to serve them, building feeder lines up there, working on the conversion of dual fuel systems. We are going to be taking over service we met with the co-op and it looks like the last 2 weeks in October is when we're going to do the switchover. And we're going to do it in 4 phases, and it'll be on a Tuesday, a Thursday, and then a Tuesday and a Thursday, provided there's not a lot of rain any of those days. Otherwise, that could be adjusted. And that's about 300 customers. Of those 300 customers, there's about 152 dual fuel customers. Those will not be converted at that same time, so it's just the main electric service that's going to happen in the last 2 weeks of October. These dual fuel systems are being converted, and those will happen hopefully before December 31st. What we've got in front of you is two incentives, one that you're aware of, and then level 2 incentive that's been increased because there are about a dozen people that we're aware of where the costs to convert have exceeded $2,000 up to maybe $3,500. Because of the buyout provisions of the negotiations, we are paying for these dual fuel systems. So for the next 10 years, like they are going to continue on with their systems. So we do want them to continue on with their dual fuel systems. So the incentive is based on a very short payback of what we will receive from providing service to those systems. What we've talked about before in the level 1 incentive was we're paying 80% of the conversion costs of these dual fuel systems. The conversion is where they have to basically take a meter from the inside of the building to the outside of the building, all the wiring, all the conduit, any service panel upgrades that are required because of the conversion, and we're paying for 80% of those costs. And hopefully that will encourage most of the customers to convert. We did put a deadline on that, December 31st of this year. We know there's at least a couple of contractors out there and then others that are working on converting those systems. So what we're asking you to do tonight is to approve the incentives, which is 80% up to $3,500. Now, for those that are more than $2,000 and under $3,500, we are requiring them to basically pledge that they're going to use the system for a period of 10 years. And then if they don't use it for that period of 10 years, we're going to have a proration of the incentive based on how long they stayed on the system. So we really do need them to stay on that system. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I think it's well-designed incentive, and we're communicating that to them, and we'd really like you to approve that.
Okay, for a little bit of background for the rest of the members of the commission, Rolf and I met with the members, and Bill met with the members of the co-op board a couple of times, as a matter of fact, and when we learned that there were issues with the Americana States customers when they came on board our dual fuel, we took the position, at least at that time, that we wanted to make sure that we were as fair with our new customers / citizens of Moorhead as we possibly could be. So that's sort of why we're doing this and taking that approach to minimize those criticisms. Any questions? David?
There's a great deal that I don't understand about this program, but that's just because. But it's going to cost nearly $250,000. I'm wondering why that's a good deal.
Why that's a good deal? Because we're paying about $500,000 for the 10 years of energy that they would have used from Red River Valley Cooperative. So we're going to be providing them with a check.
So that's the number I needed to hear.
Yep.
All I was seeing was that our, the bottom line on the memo is that it was nearly $250,000 cost. Well, why is this good? So, okay.
And, maybe just a little bit further, we have 10 years where we don't pay city transfer on any of the revenues that we obtain from those systems. So in the first 10 years, we make a margin on every kilowatt hour that's sold, plus we don't pay a 20+% transfer on that. So if we can keep as many of those customers as we can, we will quickly pay back that $250,000, hopefully in the first 5 years, and then,
And there's really no benefit. I mean, we're doing the conversion because it's a technical issue, right? I mean, the customers right now are using a system as they have been using it for many years, and the only reason we are doing a conversion is because we need to comply with our structure on the technical side.
right, yep.
So it's not like we're giving $250,000 to somebody, but basically we're just making sure that what they currently have, they will continue to have just with our infrastructure.
Right. And we do provide an incentive already. So that $250,000 isn't like, it's unlike what we would have done for existing customers within the city of Moorhead. But it's probably about 3 times the size of what our current incentive is on average. And, you know, we make a payback on that as well. So, you know, we do have to comply with our current regulations. That just keeps everything efficient. And we were encouraged by Red River Valley Co-op Board that this was going to be a big issue. We appreciated them telling us that, and I think we're kind of going above and beyond trying to make sure everybody is okay with the conversion. And we're trying to market as best we can so that we get as many as we can to, you know, implement our dual fuel system. It's tough because natural gas and fuel oil and propane are all way down in price right now.
Is that the customer's opinion, that we've gone above and beyond? I'm interested in what you just said.
Yeah,
that we've gone above and beyond.
Well, I think...
Is that the customer impression
I
as
think
well?
the customers have that feeling. I mean, we've got some of our employees that live up there, and I think they were very encouraged and heard that others were encouraged with 80%. Paying 80% of the cost on this is I think, a generous thing to do. I think the co-op board, when they heard that we were going to do a 80% incentive, they said, wow, yeah, that's...
Because they raised that issue with us previously.
Yep, so I think they were...
And in the whole scheme of the settlement negotiations, this was a small part of it.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, we are hearing that.
Well, we know it was a big issue because when we had the public meeting at the HEMCOMs, it did come up between the street lighting and these were the 2 issues that people talked about. So, and again, my point is basically, I mean, the customer is not getting anything different except for they're tied into a different system. So, you know, it's probably not a bad thing for us to say we'll carry some of the cost. You know, carrying the entire cost. I mean, they still have to shell out 20% for something that they used to have and already paid for.
You know, and we have been in contact with those customers because, of course, we were going up to 80% of $2,000, and then there's at least a dozen that are saying, mine is quite a bit more than that, so that's why we're here trying to get more. So, but again, still, it's a good incentive, or it's a good thing for them to be on our system and not go to natural gas at this point. I mean, they're right there.
Any further questions on item 9? Comments? John?
With the conversion going the last 2 weeks of October and potentially heavy building, are we going to have sufficient time for 2 months to convert 152 people for homeowners? So the question is December an appropriate time frame to have that incentive available?
I would say it's a good first deadline. I think as we get closer to that, we're going to start hearing, especially when the holiday season comes along, can you extend that or whatever? And I think we would be open to that. Almost hate saying that because we're trying to get people to move on it now. But I think we will hear that. And again, there's not a real reason why we wouldn't. You know, we don't want them not to convert.
Are we jumping ahead? Are we inspecting now in anticipation? Have we begun a process to do the required inspection so that we could get ahead of it?
Joe, why don't you come up, because that's maybe a little bit more in your area. I've talked to Mike, but
Joe Moore, Electric Operations Manager. Yes, we had a discussion in the office here a couple days ago, and depending upon how the setup is on the homeowner, if they have a meter pedestal that we can just cut the seal, or the electrician can cut the seal and remove it, do the work on the house, slug the new meter socket until we take it over, we'll let them do that. If the meter is on the house, there would be charges from the co-op to us, so those people will have to wait, but we are trying to be proactive.
That would seem to be a way to
yeah.
make it.
Well, and then the other thing, Nancy just told me that make a plug, that if there's any Oakport residents that are listening to this, get your applications in, because we've received less than 25% of that 150 so far. So instead of having a flood of those come in, and when heating season starts here now, they
Why
will
don't we
start
send out a
coming.
message to them?
Do we know that?
Yep.
If we have the list, why don't we be proactive and send out the application and ask if they return it?
Yeah, we have. We sent them a whole packet, and then now we're going to be sending them another couple of letters, one that's saying that we're converting everything in October, and make sure that if you're a dual fuel customer, that you send in your application, and then we're sending them another letter that's with this new incentive, saying we've upped the incentive, if your system is a little more expensive than the 2,000, give us a call. We're also going to be calling them and doing some other things as well. So we're going to try and get the word out there.
Okay.
Bill, with those letters, are you going to share the conversion process during that 2-week scenario so they're aware when that action is taking place?
Yeah, and it's
Assuming
attached.
just an on and off switch, so it shouldn't be too drastic of a time.
The two,
outreach for 'em.
yeah, the 2 letters I'm talking about that are going to go out right after this meeting are attached. And one of them basically says, last 2 weeks in October, here's when the conversion's going to happen. And then the other one is more on the incentive. And then actually, we're going to do door hangers that say the day certain that we're going to be doing the conversion. And then Red River Valley Cooperative is actually going to send letters out to all the customers saying, here's the day and the hour that we're going to convert you. So,
Okay.
so we're trying to communicate as much as possible. Lauren Burby's done a real nice job of trying to communicate with his customers as well. So he's got a lot of ownership in this last communication to those customers.
Okay.
So.
Anything further? Ralph?
I have one more thing. Les, would you like to make fun of Joe one more time?
I think in my entire tenure, I never made fun of Joe.
And I think he's correct.
Thank you, Les.
It's been you? Oh, okay, we'll get them.
Okay, yeah. That having been said, Mr. Bakke, nobody said you could go back to your seat. That having been said, would you like to propose a motion, please, on item 9?
I really don't have to move everything tonight, Therefore, I move approval of item number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Bakke. Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. We'll now move down to item 10, which is to approve the transmission facilities assignment agreement with MRES. William?
This won't be a controversial
We'll decide that.
item. Well, it shouldn't be, but I did want to take this opportunity to introduce you a little bit to Western Area Power Administration, because the Western Area Power Administration administrator is going to be at the next commission meeting to provide this body with an award for our Capture the Sun program. And I'll get you more information at the next meeting. But what also I'm going to have you do is there's a increase in, or there's a discount that we currently get from Western Area Power that they're looking at eliminating because of all the changes that are happening in the Southwest Power Pool. And so, I've been in conversations with them, and I'm going to ask him to explain that to you, put a little pressure on him, because we're feeling like they're picking on Moorhead first, because we're a large customer of Western Area Power. It's about $200,000 a year, and we're concerned that they're picking on us and not others regarding this voltage discount. So anyway.
So he giveth and he taketh away.
Well, exactly. So a little bit of background on this, and let me just take a couple of minutes. You see there's about 10 acronyms there, and actually in this write-up they're all covered. So I was going to talk a little bit about Western Area Power and Missouri River Energy Services, then talk a little bit about the Southwest Power Pool and MISO, and then talk a little bit about this voltage discount and get you ready for the next meeting. First of all, who is Western Area Power Administration and who is Missouri River Energy Services? Those are Moorhead's two power suppliers. Western Area Power supplies about half of our power, and Missouri River Energy Services provides the other half. Western Area,
We've got the basic thing down.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, just,
Let's not take the crayons out quite yet.
okay,
So
okay. What's been happening real recently on the transmission system is we've got we're right on the border of two transmission markets, Southwest Power Pool and MISO. Southwest Power Pool is the one that WAPA decided to join, and we are pulled into that as well, okay? So you know all about that. These agreements here, the facilities assignment agreement, is where we're transferring functional control of our transmission facilities to Missouri River Energy Services so they can transfer functional control to Southwest Power Pool. And then they can provide us with compensation for our transmission system. So that's all these agreements are for. What Western Area Power is going to do when they're here in 2 weeks is they're going to say, because you have done this, because you have transferred functional control to Missouri River and SPP, we're not going to give you a voltage discount anymore. We're going to say, explain that to us. And because they don't really have in any of their documentation what the voltage discount is for, or and then therefore what it is and why they're giving it or why they're taking it away. And a lot of customers of Western get this voltage discount. We're the first one that they're looking at taking it away from. So our argument is going to be, explain it to us, so be transparent in what this is, and why aren't you taking it away from everybody, or are you taking it away from everybody at the same time? Because they're also going to talk about taking it away October of 2015, which is when we went into SPP. So they're actually looking at going backwards in time to October of 15.
ex post facto kind of a thing.
Yep.
And you don't know if this is universal with all of their customers. It's just
No,
more
and-
public service.
And we've talked with the Missouri River Energy Services people that are, they talk with these transmission people all the time. And basically what's going on right now is they're talking about a lot of stuff. And they're not, because what's happened, and we knew this was happening, there's lots of activity in the transmission markets right now. And so WAPA is saying, Moorhead, you're getting, big compensation from SPP. We don't feel like we should have to give you this voltage discount anymore. So, and the budget committee is going to learn that, and we started out looking at probably getting around $3 million for our 31 miles of transmission. That, through the FERC process, got knocked down to about $2 million. And then we knew we were going to see an increase in our transmission rates because everybody was throwing in all these transmission costs, like Moorhead. Well, so our rates for this year went up by about $700,000. And then now we just learned that for next year, our transmission rates are going to go up by another $750,000. So
So we're moving backward.
So the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, right? And, so we've gone from 2 million down to 1.3, now to 600,000. WAPA comes in, takes another 200,000. Remember when we started this whole process, we said, no, let's not bank on this money because it may disappear. Well, it's disappearing. So we're down to under $500,000 a year benefit.
Is there a basis for this disappearing at?
Well, there is for the 700 and the 750, because that is all of the entities like Moorhead that's throwing their transmission into the SPP system. It's causing the rates to go up. What we didn't anticipate, and I just talked to Missouri River, is that we knew about the first 700,000, but we didn't expect the other 750,000 to come so quickly. We were surprised at that coming again, right away this year. We thought it would be slower over time. So,
David?
Is Mr. Bolger going to be in attendance at our next meeting, or is that?
he had a meeting today, so he couldn't make it today, but he certainly can
Oh,
make it.
he might be in Albuquerque.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm concerned that this presentation is going to take place, and he might be in Albuquerque.
Yeah, I'm
But
not
I
sure
think he
if
ought to be
he's,
with us. So
If he's available, yes, or Ben.
Or Ben,
Yep.
but I'm not understanding the basis for singling out one utility out of many.
Well, yeah, and that's why the base
And-
question has to be asked.
Absolutely.
And in addition to that, you didn't take into consideration the fact that in the FERC process, we also lost money because of the fact that our transfer is arbitrarily too high.
well, that's how it went from 3 down to 2. So I just, I didn't mention that.
It's nice that they're going to bring an award, but if we're going to have a
Yeah.
conversation that.
$50 plaque
that
isn't
could-
hardly
that
worth
could get a little
$700,000.
contentious, it'd be nice to have council present, but,
Yeah.
here's your award back.
Right, right.
Now let's talk turkey, but.
Well, we could ask them to meet with the budget committee ahead of time, too, help
That
them.
would probably be a good idea, so
That-
at least two of our number can understand what's going on.
Because that would give them an opportunity to explain it.
Before the meeting.
At least one of the two of us will understand it. Yeah, but, I guess I'm concerned that we would have that kind of a presentation really prior to any real budget impact conversation about it, much less, policy.
I think that'd be a great idea, Bill.
Yeah.
Yes, the biggest thing on the budget side, we're going to use that money from the transmission to fill back up our
Reserves.
which we all know is a big issue. So this is not good news, period.
No.
And we're gonna,
I mean, the increase, the $750,000 increase is going to force you to have at least a 2.5% increase in rates just to break even.
Well, is
And we're-
MRES and / the power pool taking any positions with regard to this move by WAPA?
Missouri, well, we're the only ones that are being targeted right now for the elimination of this voltage discount.
Okay, but then
Watertown,
it could affect other,
oh, yeah.
so
I mean, they're,
that's why I'm asking, is MRES stepping into this fray
yeah,
as well?
oh, they definitely are.
Sounds like a sales opportunity.
Sounds like.
well, but that's the second issue. I mean, the first issue is 750, right? I mean, we didn't expect the 750, and I believe MRES didn't expect the 750. I mean, they were standing up here selling us on the idea that the SPP move was a good move. And now we're talking 700,000 the first year, 750,000 the second year, and then we have the other thing, 200,000 on top of that. I mean, but the 750 is something that.
So you're saying it may not have been a good move?
Yep, I'm saying it may not have been a good move.
Well, the SPP move,
I mean, we had no control.
you had no choice over, that's WAPA. You can ask them in 2 weeks and say, okay, how'd you guys make the decision going to SPP? Because it isn't necessarily.
Doesn't seem like a good deal to us.
Right, and they'll explain it. I mean, they'll talk about access to the markets and how it's helping them control their rates and all that
Okay,
stuff.
so then they're taking away all the incentives to be involved.
Well, again, have them explain it, because I think it'd be an interesting education
Would we have
process.
seen a similar issue with MISO? Do you know whether they're going to go up on the cost side as well, or is it just SPP that's doing it?
MISO, I mean, that's a good question for them to answer. It actually would have helped MRES in some respects, but it would have probably hurt us. We probably would have had these similar types of increases, but we may not have gotten the compensation.
Sure.
I mean, we're offset. There's a lot of communities in this area that didn't have any transmission to put in, but they're still seeing the same increases that we're seeing. So at least we've got an offset, and they'll tell you that, too. They'll say, well, Moorhead's pretty fortunate because you're getting compensated
Well,
for.
but we're not getting something for nothing because we built 31 miles of transmission line for which we never got compensated in the first place. So
Right.
I'm not taking that argument for like a second. I mean, we build it, it's our stuff. We have to get paid for it like everybody else does. So I get it. I mean, the argument should have been, why haven't we been paid for this for the last 15 years? But again, I get it.
Right.
But I think we should look into this because this is not kosher here. I mean, and we had that discussion. I remember we were standing here, it's like, it's the $700,000 increase. Are we expecting anything else more? It's like, no, we're all fine with that, blah, blah. We all knew that we were going into an open pool and that prices can't fluctuate, but to the tune of $750,000 from one year to the other, that's big fluctuation. That's not something.
That's an out-and-out increase.
Yeah.
Pretty soon you're talking real money.
Well, and that's $750,000 that isn't ever going away.
No,
So it's
it's not gonna go
$750,000 annually.
Yeah, it's not going to go down, right?
Yep.
And then again, the bigger issue on top of it all, from a budget perspective, I mean, that money was going to go into the reserves. That's why we have been willing to say, okay, we're going to use the reserves for certain things.
Now they're taking that away.
And they're taking that away. And then we have the discussion on top of that, the additional 200,000. I'm like, well, if you're taking that incentive, the voltage incentive away from everybody, fine, we'll have a different discussion on that one. Yeah, we'll gang up with the others as well. But if it's just us, ain't going to happen. We're going to fight that one. You can't just single one out or two out and say, well, we're going to not give it to you because of whatever.
And this is an administrative decision, is it not?
This is totally, WAPA can make the decision, and the gentleman that's going to be handing you the award is the top guy. And he can say yay or nay to this. Yep.
Okay, well, if we can have a preliminary discussion with our budget members, that'd be a smart move.
Yep.
Do you know his travel plans into the city at that time? Are we going to have time that day to slide a meeting of the budget committee together?
I'm actually really shocked that they're coming at all. I mean, because, you know, the administrator of WAPA is he's a nice guy, really busy guy. He hasn't given out an administrator award since he became administrator 3 years ago. So this is his first award that he's giving out. And so, I mean, we should be very honored by that. And, you know, so we're going to.
So we shouldn't throw it at him or anything?
Yeah, we shouldn't throw it at him.
Tell that to Ralph.
So, I mean, his plans, I'm sure.
It's tough to get by the German.
Their plans are they're going to fly in at 3 o'clock, and they're probably going to fly out at 8 o'clock. So, I mean, I think if the Budget Committee is going to meet with them, it's going to be right before the meeting. But I'll confirm when they're coming in. They actually were going to come in during our open house for Public Power Week, but the administrator had something else going on. So that's why we said this was his second choice was our next commission meeting on the 11th. So.
And we are on it. I mean, this is no question about it, but there's two different things, right? Business is business and
Right.
honor is another thing.
Yep.
So we'll be graceful and gracious, but we also need to bring up the issue. I mean,
Yep.
this is real money we're talking about here.
Yep. And it'll be, you know, it'll be an education because he can explain. I mean, this is, I mean, in probably the, I don't know, 20 years or so, I don't know if WAPA's been in front of this
Not that I
body.
can recollect.
No.
Would you mind condensing this conversation of the last 10 minutes into some written form prior to then?
Like the lowest common denominator?
Yeah.
kind of thing?
That'd be nice.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that. Okay. I would recommend approval of this because
I'm still on that gracious thing.
we need this to move forward with all the other things that we're doing.
Okay. All of that having been said, Mr. Baki, could I have a motion, please, concerning item 10?
No, but I'll second it.
Well, we're going to sit here until you make the motion.
He's Norwegian. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll second the motion.
All those in favor signify by... Yeah, I know, yeah,
Dragons got to stick together.
yeah.
Hey,
All those in favor, did we vote or not?
yes, we did.
Thank you. Next, we're getting into lime sludge.
Chris?
Item 11,
I'm not going to move to approve.
lime sludge. We'll tone that down for those purposes. Chris?
I'll just give a brief synopsis on this item.
Hopefully.
Back in 2015, MPCA changed some of the rules regarding lime sludge disposal and storage. So at that time, we commissioned a study with A2S to look at some of our future options for storage, including long-term storage at the site and also potential landfilling of lime sludge. So one of the items that we're looking at here is the approval of some specialized testing to test the sludge to determine the suitability of the sludge for future landfilling. So a little bit more than just walking out on the sludge and grabbing it. We have to get a rig, basically like a flotation rig, and drill some cores into the sludge to do a little bit of chemistry on the sludge itself to determine if Clay County or others would be able to hopefully accept that sludge as waste in the future. So
Okay.
it's just $3,000 to do the specialized testing.
Any questions for Chris on the subject of lime sludge?
Can you say sludge one more time?
Sludge.
Thank you.
I just think we put the two words together. It is slime. It's sludge and lime, so it is, it's just slime.
Ghostbusters?
Yeah,
Who are you going to call?
not far removed.
Who are you going to call? Chris?
Okay.
Ghostbusters.
Unfortunately, I'm going to ask for a motion on number 11.
He's lost control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Baki? Mr. Regala?
Oh, go ahead.
Is there a second, Mr. Baki? This is out of control.
He doesn't want to.
You don't hear it?
You're the
I'll
chair.
second the sludge motion.
All in all, not surprising, but you did it in such a gracious way. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That brings us down to item 12, which has a very high degree of interrelationship with item 13. And so, Chris, I'm going to ask you to expound upon both of these items before we go much further in terms of signing a letter.
Sure. I'll start with just talking about the item number 12. This is approved draft aquifer management plan for the Buffalo Aquifer. So, as you know, over the past several years and probably even past 10, 15 years, we've talked in length about future water supply options for Moorhead Public Service. And we've pursued those options side by side for at least the last 10 years. And one of the things that we talked about for the last 5, 6 years is developing an aquifer management plan for the Buffalo Aquifer. And the kind of long-term vision for the aquifer management plan is somewhat similar to the water main asset management plan, in that a lot of the fundamental questions about how we would do some type of drought project and what kind of triggers we would have for a drought project on the Buffalo Aquifer. What are some of those fundamental questions? What do they look like, and what are the answers to those questions? You'll remember back in 2014, 2015, we did some pretty extensive hydraulic modeling of the aquifer in terms of what are some of the capacities that could be taken for the aquifer in terms of a long-term drought situation. We did quite a bit of modeling there. We really wanted to take that modeling and turn it into a plan and to develop a long-term kind of vision for what expansion on the Buffalo Aquifer would look like. So we're hoping to have this aquifer management plan completed by the end of the year in 2016, so within the next few months. We wanted to get it in front of you today to really start the process and solicit some feedback before we present it to some other parties, including the Clay County Commission and the Minnesota DNR. Some of the highlights of the plan, a lot of it is material that I presented here before over the past year. We just formalized a lot of that material into this plan and kind of developed it. I'll just kind of touch on a few of the highlights, but feel free to obviously follow with any questions you might have. We looked at, in terms of the infrastructure expansion, we looked at some of the alignments that we developed here internally, and we had some budgetary estimates that we've presented over the past year, and actually in the report, some of those estimates came down significantly due to, back in 2015, we actually used Williston bid prices, so a lot of the pipe work going on in Williston, those are the bid prices we used. After looking at that a little bit further, we actually revised some of those numbers downward such that project savings from an initial capital perspective actually came down $4 to $5 million. So some good news in the short term there in terms of overall initial capital cost. One of the highlights from my perspective is that we developed a kind of a drought monitoring tool that's specific to MPS. So one of the things that we wanted to identify as part of this plan is what are some of the triggers for infrastructure improvement. So we know we want to eventually do an expansion on the Buffalo Aquifer in the Sabin area, but what are some of the triggers from a drought standpoint that would really basically move up the time frame for expansion? So what we did is we actually took some of the mathematical tools available, looking at reservoir heights for our, on the Red River, basically Lake Traverse and some of the discharges from Mud Lake, taking that along with some of our Buffalo Aquifer levels and then incorporating some just overall drought assessment tools like the Palmer Index, which we've talked about quite a bit, some of the other standard drought monitoring tools, taking all that data into one package or one model to spit out kind of a drought severity index number specific to MPS. So this is something new and is going to be pretty useful for us from a kind of when do we need to trigger expansion on the Buffalo Aquifer. So that's one of the really significant tools, but also just as a kind of an overall project timeline. So we refined a lot of the project timeline, some of the key benchmarks in terms of permitting, funding, all those types of things we formalized in this plan. I would say it's still in early draft phase in that a lot of the wording, some of the wording is still cumbersome. There's still a few typos we need to address. But a lot of the content is I'd say at about 80% in terms of what the overall plan is going to look like. We wanted to get it in front of you today just to have an option to review it and provide any input so that we could really start to solidify the plan and get it on track for that approval in late 2016.
As a part of this whole process, and as a part of your presentation last night with the City Council, we have in front of us a letter to the Lake Agassiz Water Authority dealing with whether or not we will move forward with their program, their project, as it relates to future uses of water coming from the west. And in the letter, we seek to tell them that, no, we're not going forward, that we've got our own plan, which sort of ties in with this management plan a great deal. Mm-hmm. And so looking at the members of the commission, now is the time to express any concerns that they may have relative to which direction we take before we actually sign a letter that obligates us not to participate. Rolf?
So let me ask you, I have a crystal ball, right, Chris? And I know the river is going to run dry for 3 years. No water out of the river. Any concerns with the current system?
In our current system, no.
What about 5 years?
As it stands today, no.
What about 5 years?
I would say in the next 10 years, when our average day demands, when we can't meet our average day demands with our existing well infrastructure, that is the ultimate trigger for when we need to expand on the Buffalo Aquifer. And right now, that's probably going to happen between 2030 and 2040, somewhere in there, depending on growth, population projections, all those things. But somewhere 2030, 2040, somewhere in there, when average day demands exceed what we can do with our existing well infrastructure, then we need to expand.
And that would be existing well infrastructure just on the aquifer, right? Not the intake at the river.
Right, just on the wells themselves.
So right now we're good for a prolonged drought. We can use the existing infrastructure. We can meet current demand. If the demand goes up, we'll have to expand the well field, but we still will be able to meet that increased demand with no water out of the river.
Correct.
Because that's going to be the big question, right?
Absolutely.
We have a 5-year drought, we have a 7-year drought, whatever it is, which we haven't seen in the last 120 years, but this place has been around for somewhat longer than that. And all of a sudden, we're sitting here going like, or somebody else, well, you will be here still, but I won't be. Somebody else will say, what were they thinking, right? So based on information we have right now, so the question is 3-year drought, 5-year drought, so the answer is we can handle it, right?
Right. One thing we'll have to keep an eye on is the condition of the Highway 10 well line. Yep. It's cast iron. We've experienced some failures on it. So if we, that's one other thing. If we see more failures, that part will maybe need to accelerate from that 2030 to 2040 timeframe, but from a pure capacity standpoint.
Yep.
Well, let's say, for example, all things being equal, and the Lake Agassiz project goes through. Do we know, in terms of future drought water usages, whether the water coming on that line would be made available to us at that time anyway? Because if we have a regional drought happening, one could suspect that the water in the Missouri may go down at the same time. And what are those impacts, and what are the limitations that are going to be imposed on Lake Agassiz water?
Yeah, that's one point that Ralph has previously brought up many times, and the downstream
So I'm
users.
copying Ralph?
Yep.
Get your downstream point there.
Last night I thought it was a pretty interesting language in the development agreement itself that talked about some of the contingencies associated with the development agreement, and Bill actually kind of read off some of the language in that development agreement that talked about some of the threats to the project. One of the threats is that there could be litigation from downstream users such that if they did not have capacity, they could seek litigation against parties involved with the Lake Agassiz project, the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. So a big concern in terms of that project, but something that, if we move forward with the Buffalo Aquifer project, it's a local control project. Obviously, we'd have to work through Clay County and Minnesota DNR to make sure that they're aware of our plans. But primarily, it's under MPS's control.
Well, not totally. I mean, one thing I've brought up before as well, I mean, that aquifer needs to be protected, right? That's the big deal. So, because that would be, if we go that route, that's the water we have. There's no alternative. So if we dump something in it, it's going to affect what we drink here or cannot drink. I mean, the stage we're in right now, I mean, we wouldn't be committing to whatever our share of 5% or whatever it is of a $1 billion project. I mean, right now we're saying, hey, we're not even interested in going forward any further because it would cost us about $100,000, I think, to continue. And I'm comfortable with that. I believe the project is a good project. The pipeline is a good project. I think it's needed. We just happen to be lucky enough to have an alternative. And not just an alternative, that's a little pond in the backwoods. We have a very good aquifer, which has been managed really well over the last 20-some years. We have a plan. So it's, like I said, the pipeline, in my opinion, is a very good project. But I don't see from where we sit right now that we need to participate in it. And I'm happy to give up our share as it will be, or as it may, to somebody else like a Jamestown or Valley City, who need the water because they don't have an alternative, or East Grand Forks for that matter, because they do not have the aquifer in the plan. But again, it also needs to be understood, and not just only in 2016, but in 2046 and 56 and 66, that aquifer is it. We're going to pull as much as we can out of the river, obviously, and we'll continue to do that. But if that runs dry, that aquifer is what needs to be protected, period. And that's not just in our hands. That's one or two counties, right? That is a whole bunch of entities that need to work together to actually say, yep, we're going to protect that thing, come what may. I mean, if you want to know how close it is to a surface, you go to any of the open pits. That is the water level of the aquifer. That's the water level of the water that we drink. It's not 100 feet down. It's not protected by 100 feet of clay. It's right there. So that's, again, hopefully people will remember that in 30, 40, 50 years from now.
And one other concern that's been expressed over the past year is that, if Moorhead drops out, will the project, in terms of the Lake Agassiz project, continue? And just recently, I believe this past week, there was an article in the paper that suggested that about 140 CFS has been committed to the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, which the threshold for the agreement, and I'm kind of skipping ahead to the next item, but the threshold for the agreement and the project to continue would be 100 CFS. So Moorhead's withdrawal from the project would not negatively impact the project from moving forward. Would be, from a pure development agreement standpoint, it'll still move forward.
Les.
I know at our last discussion of this, Heidi was going to bring it to the city council. Did you all discuss this at any point since our last meeting, Chuck?
Turn this on. No, we haven't, but I remember asking for a request at the end of the meeting for council reports, so.
Okay, thank you.
David.
Their reaction last night as well, in what do you call that kind of meeting?
Committee of the Whole.
Committee of the Whole was very supportive, I think, really, to each member. I didn't read any particular concern. As a matter of fact, short of endorsement, it was really pretty well received. The Lake Agassiz project is essential It's going to carry forward. They just don't know what the time frame is.
Could be many years down the road.
I mean, they have a lot of hoops to jump through. But it's essential because that is Fargo's solution. They don't have a solution other than that one. So while they have all those hoops to jump through and we all need that project to happen, Moorhead has an opportunity to do something for a lot fewer dollars and a much shorter time frame if we needed to have that time frame. We could be done in 4.5 to 5 years if suddenly the rain stopped and the river started to flow low. We would be able to move forward and really start to tap a resource as quickly as we could get there and get it here. They don't have that assurance, and so while we should continue to be absolutely supportive of everything they're trying to do with that project, I don't think it's in our best interest to invest in it any longer. So that was the opinion of one commissioner to the council last night, and I suggested to them that this group was probably ready to move forward. So
I think that's correct. It becomes a question of how many more $100,000 payments are we going to invest in that particular project, when in fact we should be taking those funds and looking at the other alternative that is far less expensive from a ratepayer standpoint and from our community standpoint. John?
Just a clarification. The projections that you're showing for usage is on today's numbers. So there's no conservation measures put in place. So if we do have a high demand or normal growth here, and some of the conservation measures they talked about here, certainly we could reduce some of that demand if we implemented those conservation measures. Is that correct?
That's correct. One thing you want to think about, we're kind of using the average day demand as the benchmark. You know, the summer demands typically are about 1.5 times the average day demand. So, conservation measures, the attempt there would be to curtail the peak of the summer such that, instead of it being 1.5, we're more in the 1.1 or something like that, so that we're not seeing those higher peaks in the summertime.
Ralph?
Yeah, and maybe one more point as well on the cost, because David brought up a very good point on the cost side. People need to understand too that our cost would not end with the pipeline being built, because the pipeline would only get the water into the Cheyenne. We would still have to get it over from the Cheyenne over into our plant somehow, and we would have to change our water plant. Is that correct? We'd have to build a different plant for it because the water is of a different type.
It's likely that would be the case.
Yeah. So there's additional costs. It's not just a matter of paying our share for that, but we would actually have quite a large expense to build a pipeline for, 10 miles or whatever it is, to get it into a plant and then change the plant itself. So, that's part of the cost consideration.
And there'd be a huge operating and maintenance cost that we would share that hasn't even been quantified yet in any way.
That is correct.
Okay, so let me ask you this, members of the commission, are we ready to take any action on items 12 and 13?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the draft plan for management of the Buffalo Aquifer, encouraging staff to work with us toward that end of 2016 timeframe that Christopher suggested a little while ago, for us to have a plan in place then by the first of the year.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bakke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. That brings us to item 13, which in effect is to approve a letter, the copy of which all of you have in front of you or you've seen, that would be provided to Chairman Tim Mahoney of the Lake Agassiz Water Authority, indicating that Moorhead will be electing to not participate in the ongoing process beyond anything that they would want us to participate, certainly not financially. Is there any motion with regard to that matter?
I move approval of item 13.
Thank you, Les. Is there a second? Second. We have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, before I adjourn, again, thank you, Les, for all you've done with us and for us. Paul, and we have Public Power Week coming up, and there will be some things on October 4th. Capture the Sun Community Solar Garden ribbon cutting ceremony at 4:30 in the afternoon between the two turbines. I'm assuming both of them will be working at the time. We will then have the High Service Pumping Station ribbon cutting ceremony at 5, and a cookout where did Captain MPS go?
He just
Okay.
left.
Where Captain Power will be there in the form of Joe, I'm told, roped into it. He promised me he won't have a cape and tights, but is that sufficient, Casey? That'll take care of it? Brats, hot dogs? Come on over.
And the Missouri, we're getting lots of guests because of these activities that we're doing, but Missouri River Energy Services, Tom Heller, and others from Missouri River Energy Services will be with us for the open house. Yep.
That's a long way to come for a free brat.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. We're ready to adjourn. Thank you, Les.
Thank you, Les.